As the 2010 Winter Olympics got underway in Vancouver, the host country's star-studded men's hockey team were heavy favorites to win the gold medal on Canadian soil. Their roster was overflowing with NHL superstars, and they had home ice advantage. But as it turned out, Team Canada's path to Olympic glory was more dramatic than expected, an epic journey that culminated with one of the great sports moments in Canada's history and turned one of its foremost superstars into a national hero. It should come as no surprise that Canada is the most dominant country in the history of Olympic hockey. As of 2025, the Canadian men's national team has won more medals than any other country. And despite enduring a 5-decade drought without winning a tournament, the Canadian men's 9 gold medals are also tops. If, however, there was one year where the stars truly aligned for the world's preeminent hockey powerhouse, it was in 2010. That year marked the first time that Canada hosted the Olympics following the IOC's decision to allow professionals to compete and the NHL's subsequent decision to allow its players to participate. See, when Canada hosted the Olympics for the first time in 1988, pros weren't allowed to play. Incidentally, the Soviet Union took home the gold that year, and the Canadian men didn't even medal in Calgary. But in Vancouver, Canada's best players, NHL players, weren't permitted to represent their country. In other words, this was a golden opportunity for Canada to reassert its hockey dominance on its own territory. Of course, that opportunity also meant tremendous pressure for Team Canada, which came into the tournament as the clear favorite despite shockingly failing to medal at the 2006 games in Turin. But if ever there was a hockey team built to withstand pressure, it was this one. Because, my God, that team was absolutely stacked. In fact, let me give you a few NHL superstars that didn't make Team Canada's roster at the 2010 games. Martin St. Louis, Vincent Lecavalier, a young Steven Stamkos. Those guys, who ultimately combined for more than 3,000 points in the NHL, got cut. Basically, every player that made the team was an Art Ross winner, a Stanley Cup champion, an eventual Hall of Famer, or all of the above. Guys like Joe Thornton, Jarome Iginla, Chris Pronger, Scott Niedermayer, Martin Brodeur, Roberto Luongo, and of course, Sidney Crosby, the undisputed best player on the planet at the time. On paper, this was clearly the best team in the 12-team tournament, not to mention one of the greatest rosters ever assembled for an Olympic Games. A team built to ruin the Russians, to stomp the Swedes, and to annihilate the Americans. Except after all the pomp and pageantry, as the preliminary round unfolded, this Canadian juggernaut looked shockingly mortal. After obliterating Norway in their tournament opener, the Canadians only barely snuck by the Swiss in Game 2, a 3-2 win that went to shootout. And then, in their final and most highly anticipated preliminary round game against the Americans, the Canadians got bested, falling 5-3 in their first Olympic loss to Team USA since 1960. As a result of that shocking upset, Canada finished second in their preliminary round division behind the US, which meant that Canada would have to win a do-or-die qualifying match to get into the quarterfinals. But perhaps more significantly, Canada's shaky first round, and that loss to the US particularly, dispelled the idea that this tournament was a lock for the host country and its star-studded roster. It also compelled Team Canada head coach Mike Babcock to make a big change. After watching a 37-year-old Brodeur give up 4 goals on 22 shots against Team USA, Babcock decided to start Luongo in net for his team's must-win qualifying round match against the Germans. It was a bold move to say the least, benching the NHL's all-time wins leader and an Olympic gold medalist in favor of Luongo. But it's worth noting that Luongo had home ice advantage in that tournament. At the time, the future Hall of Famer played for the Vancouver Canucks, and Luongo's 15-save shutout against Norway in Team Canada's group stage opener came on his NHL team's home ice. That said, it didn't really matter who was in net for Canada's do-or-die game against Germany. The Canadians exploded for 8 goals that night, toppling Germany and punching their ticket into a quarterfinal showdown against Russia, Canada's greatest nemesis on international ice and another juggernaut loaded with NHL stars. Alex Ovechkin, Ilya Kovalchuk, Evgeny Malkin, Pavel Datsyuk. This was the team that most pundits had predicted, and most fans had hoped, would meet Canada in the championship game. Instead though, the two powerhouses squared off in a quarterfinal matchup that wasn't nearly as competitive as expected. In front of a ravenous, partisan crowd of more than 17,000 at Canada Hockey Place, the host country overpowered the Russians, exploding for 3 unanswered goals in the first period and ultimately cruising to a commanding 7-3 victory. Suddenly, all that consternation that had followed the loss to the US was a thing of the past. Canada was looking like the favorite once again, with Luongo firmly entrenched as their starting goalie and contributions coming from up and down their superstar-laden lineup. And although Team Canada made their semi-final matchup against Slovakia more interesting than it should have been, nearly squandering a 3-goal lead in the final 9 minutes of the third period, the Canadians ultimately came away with a victory, securing their spot in the championship game and putting themselves one win away from capturing a gold medal on Canadian soil. Frankly, it's hard to overstate how much this game and that gold medal meant to Canada. This game had the potential to be one of the great triumphs in Canadian history, or one of the most excruciating experiences the country had ever been through. In a country defined by hockey, this game was everything. And which country stood between the Canadians and their glorious destiny? The Americans, of course. The only team to beat them in the tournament. A team that had won all 5 of its games in regulation, including a 6-1 beatdown of Finland in the semifinals. They weren't as talented as the Canadians, but Team USA was undefeated. And critically, they weren't dealing with the same kind of pressure that the host country was. But while just about everyone expected an intense, captivating game, few could have anticipated just how unforgettable that gold medal matchup would be. Before the puck even dropped, Canada Hockey Place was absolutely rocking, and the overwhelmingly Canadian crowd lost its damn mind when Jonathan Toews pounced on a rebound roughly 13 minutes into the first period. Then, midway through the second period, Corey Perry brought the crowd to its feet once again.
Back comes Getzlaff, heading north, centering it loose, Perry
2-0 Canada. The vibes? They were pretty good in their home and native land. Hold on though. Not long after Canada took a 2-goal lead, the Americans got on the board, cutting their deficit in half with a goal that surely embarrassed Luongo for 2 reasons. 1, it was his Canucks teammate Ryan Kesler who scored, and 2, it was soft as hell. 2-1, and that score held through a 10-second intermission. If Canada could hold the slimmest of leads for 20 more minutes, the gold medal would be theirs. However, unfortunately for them, the 17,000 rabid fans in the building and the millions of Canadians watching at home, they could only hold that lead for 19 minutes.
Pavelski there, slipped one in front. Kane a shot off with them. They score! Zach Parise out of a net bounce scramble, and the game is tied!
With their net empty and less than 60 seconds left in regulation, Team USA pulled themselves back from the brink, with Zach Parise capping a tenacious sequence with an improbable game-tying goal. In the history of Canadian Olympic hockey, that might be the single most deflating moment. Just like that, with only seconds left on the clock, Canada's lead was gone. The vibe in the building and in living rooms across the country went from exultant to devastated. This game was going to overtime. Sudden death. The kind of situation that needs a hero, and Canada had one. All tournament long, Crosby, the best player in the world, had been a rock for Canada, tallying 6 points in their first 6 games, including the shootout winner against Switzerland. If there was one player on that roster who might have seemed destined to propel Canada to a gold medal on Canadian soil, it was Crosby, the spiritual successor to Wayne Gretzky and Mario Lemieux. And sure enough, less than 8 minutes into overtime, Crosby was indeed the difference maker, cementing himself as a national hero and a Canadian hockey legend with the golden goal.
Up with it again, he's on the ice with a Ginlet. A Ginlet scoping! Sidney Crosby, the golden goal! And Canada has once and one Olympic gold! It will be Sidney Crosby to leave his mark on this Olympic tournament.
For Canadian hockey fans, or Canadians I should say, that was one of those rare, you'll always remember where you were moments. A goal and a victory rivaled on the international stage by perhaps only Paul Henderson's game winner in the 1972 Summit Series and Lemieux's clincher in the '87 Canada Cup. Meanwhile, for Crosby, a 3-time Stanley Cup champion and one of the greatest NHLers ever, that goal remains a crowning achievement and the thing that Canadian fans most want to talk to him about when they bump into him on the street. And ultimately, that Canadian gold medal in Vancouver will forever be remembered as one of the great moments in Winter Olympics history, up there with 1980's Miracle on Ice and the Jamaican bobsled team's breakthrough in 1988. And while Canada will undoubtedly continue to dominate Olympic hockey in perpetuity, it's hard to imagine a more gratifying gold than the one they won at home, courtesy of Sidney Crosby's golden goal. Thanks for watching. If you like this video and want to see more content like this, hit that subscribe button.